The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host, Joyce Joya.
Hello, Googlization Nation, and welcome to another episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. With my co-host Joyce Joya today again. So,
great to be here.
Joyce, yeah, we've got some great guests today. One is for years and years and years we've been hearing about people are our most important asset. Companies claim that. They got it on their posters, they've got it in the brochures, they got it in their marketing plans, but there's really no meat. It sort of was just the words on a poster, the words on a wall, the words on some paper, but they didn't walk the talk. So until recently, SEC, which is mostly for publicly traded companies, but it has it's going to have a huge effect all the way down. We're going to be talking about with Solange Charas, whose company HCMoneyball met Solange about a year ago, had multiple conversations, introduced to a few groups. She's in her heyday. She talked about she was ahead of her time, and it's true. She's been talking about valuing human capital management for years, and it's coming to being. So we're going to be talking about with her and also with Debbie Levitt. Debbie has a company called Delta CX. Also one called P-Type, but the Delta CX, I met Debbie a few years ago in another group, and she really enlightened me as well on the importance of candidate experience, but not just things you do. We're talking about user experience. We're talking about the technology, the design, right, the colors. I said this to a few people that HR doesn't know how to spell CX and UX. And
sadly, I think that might be true.
And it wasn't important, but so many times we talked about UX and CX, and now like the talent board, we talked with Kevin Grossman, a few weeks ago. I mean, they're making CX, which is candidate experience, the same as customer experience, but again, not paying attention to it. From their side, they are from a user experience, from the employer side, they were looking at the user experience, but not necessarily from the candidate. So we'll be talking with Debbie, and she's got a new course that she's offering for free.
Yes, a video course even.
Yeah,
online.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So Joyce, again, we say this every week, and I want to make sure that we move through the headlines and the updates pretty quickly. But just this week, the hiring numbers came out, and they were disappointing. Yeah. They were way down. But two other reports, I think it just came out yesterday, maybe the day before, the job openings hit a record. We go back, and people say
going through the roof.
Hey, we are going back to normal. Going back to normal is for all the talent, the recruiters and the companies that were struggling to hire people in 2018 and 2019 because they couldn't find enough people. We didn't always go back to normal. We exceeded it. Where the first, I think the highest number of job openings ever was in the fall of 2018.
Right.
And we blew by that by about 500,000. So it's getting tougher, despite the fact that companies slowed the rate of hiring. They're still not finding the people. That's what that's saying. There's lots of job openings, but we're not finding the people.
Well, maybe it's a combination of the fact that the jobs that are being offered aren't being marketed correctly.
Well, there's a lot of reasons.
And
I know a lot of people are blaming the stimulus checks, and
that's true.
There's a lot of different factors, but overall, there's a lot of job openings, which means people are at least posting those again.
Right.
And unemployment ticked up a little bit, but companies are still complaining. I took 3 pictures over the last week of mostly restaurants or retail where there was a sign that said, "We've cut back our hours because we can't find enough people." The 24-hour McDonald's the other night, we were in Florida, drove through it. They said, "We're closing in 20 minutes. It's a 24-hour McDonald's closing at midnight to 6 because they can't find enough staff. The diner down the street closes now. 24-hour diner closes 3 days a week. That they're not opened all night because they can't find the staff. So again, there's lots to talk about in things. One last thing before we jump, or not one last thing, but one thing before we jump in. Got the my adaptability webinar next week.
Right, on the 20th, right?
Yeah,
the 20th, Thursday?
February. Where did I come up with that? May 20th. May 20th,
Thursday,
1 p.m. We're going to be talking about how to grow and thrive in an FCDD world, an effed up world, which is, by the way, FCDD came from our second guest today, Debbie Levitt. She was the one that introduced me to that. Frustrating, confusing, disappointing, and distracting. So we're going to be talking about that. It's free. So the link is displayed on the screen. Hopefully that you'll be able to join us. For those who are listening afterwards on the podcast, you can go to bit.ly/AQAI520. That's bit.ly/AQAI520. Joyce, anything on your end exciting?
Wow. Well, this pipeline thing, this ransomware pipeline disruption is creating havoc in the industry that I'm going to be presenting to next week.
Oh, wow. Timely. Yeah, we talk about VUCA. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, we can't wait to go back to normal." Well, this is part of the normal.
Yeah, I'm talking exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what I've talked about. We're going forward. It's an evolution of normal. You
next
call it
wave of normal. Next waves of normal. Yeah,
exactly.
So let's, without further ado, without haste, let's bring on Solange, Dr. Solange Charas. Her company is HCMoneyball. Plus, she's got a pretty very interesting history. She talks about being an alien in HR. So welcome, welcome, Solange.
Welcome, Solange. You talk about and we've just talked about recently the fact that the largest asset that organizations have, the largest single item expense too, is what? People, right?
Exactly. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, well, you talk about the fact that there's a tsunami of human capital coming, that you believe is coming. So what do you think that means for HR?
Well, a lot of big change afoot. So first, I just want to say hi, Ira and Joyce, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And thank you for acknowledging that I've been doing this work for 20 some odd years, because I really am a geek and a geezer. I'm not so sure you can put me in the Googlization category, although I Google all day long, so maybe I am. But I have been doing this work for an awfully long time, and both from the outside as a consultant, helping organizations, and from the inside, being the Chief Human Resources Officer. So I really have a good handle on the landscape and the challenges that companies are facing today. And you're absolutely right. For most organizations in our service-based economy, the single largest line item expense that a company incurs is going to be around people. And for many years, most of the financial community and most of the management community thought of that line item expense as an expense, right? This is how much we spend on people, and it's a sunk cost, and we can't do much about it. And the thinking is now beginning to change. And the reason that it's changing is a couple of things. One is research by Ocean Tomo that shows that intangible assets make up about 90% of the S&P 500 market valuation. And that has grown from only 15%. So it went from 15% in 1975 to 90% in 2020. So the vast majority of what makes companies valuable are their intangible assets. And humans and people are considered intangible assets for the organization. So we've got an economic reason to think about it, and we've got an operating reason to think about it. Because if you do think about it, if you're spending the most of your expenses, the vast majority of your expenses on people, and you're not measuring whether or not you're getting a return on that spend, you are not being a good business person. And, think about it in your own terms. If most of your income is going to support your house, and you are not making sure that your house is, waterproof, or that you've got mold in it, you're not taking care of your most important asset, it's going to crumble around you. And the value of your home is going to depreciate. So it just makes good business sense to think about people as an investment instead of as purely an expense. And I'm not the only one that's saying this. This is what the SEC is now saying.
Right. Can we get to the, you brought a slide. Roxy, would you put that slide up for us, please? Thanks. So talk a little bit about this for us, please. Solange.
Yeah. So you see that little tsunami there, that I guess it's not little, it's the big tsunami is really this concept of human capital. And how do we deploy human capital? How do we attract human capital? How do we retain human capital? How do we optimize what we're spending on people to make sure that our companies are sustainable and address the needs or the new purpose of the corporation, the 5 constituents of the new purpose of the corporation. And this tsunami is about to crash down on existing business models or existing ways of doing business. It's going to change how disclosures are made and how environmental social governance is thought about. So that's that second little wave. And the third little wave is it's going to crash down on investors. And when I say investors, I don't necessarily just mean outside investors. I mean inside investors, how we inside of organizations are investing in our human capital. So it's sort of like a little play on a concept there. So,
yes. And with apologies to Hokusai, right?
Yes.
Hokusai is the artist who painted the wave, that famous, beautiful Japanese wave.
Exactly.
So Solange, how do we square? I mean, when I hear this, and I can imagine what's going through the minds of a lot of HR people, is how do we square quantifying human capital with empathy and compassion and treating people as human beings and not just widgets and robots? Because that's sort of going back to the Frederick Taylor, model and Slode's model of, people, let's just robotize human beings and convert them. We converted humans into robots. And, so how does this square with that?
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up because you've made an underlying assumption. You've basically said that using data analytics to inform our HR decisions is what we should be doing, right? And you're absolutely right. It is what we should be doing. And in a second, I'll give you some indication of how we've proven that out with our own research. The second assumption that you've made is that using human capital analytics is really a pathway to dehumanizing human capital, dehumanizing the people part of the organization. And that's the big argument, right? That's the big pushback is, no, I don't want to use data analytics because when I use that to inform my decisions, I'm basically dehumanizing my workforce. I'm treating them like robots. But
maybe not.
We would argue, and I'm saying we because I'm writing a book on this topic with a co-author, Stella Lepouchors. I'm giving her a shout out. We would argue that using human capital analytics is actually the opposite of dehumanizing the workforce. It's actually a way of understanding what's going to benefit the majority of the employees. So in our processes today, we usually take care of the squeaky wheel, right? And the squeaky wheel takes the attention away from the majority of the other employees who are not squeaky wheels. And what data analytics does is it helps you really understand if the squeaky wheel should be paid attention to, and the needs and wants and desires of everyone else in the organization that's not the squeaky wheel. So you're actually making decisions that benefit more people in the organization than just the one that's raising their hand and, making noise. And so that's the first thing, is that we can use data analytics to actually make better decisions that raise all employees. And here's my geek, right? What does Spock say? The needs of the many is greater than the needs of the one. And when we use data analytics, we actually understand the needs of the many. So that's the first thing.
Right.
The second thing is, we just completed, again, Stella Lapouchore and I, working with the conference board, so we're both researchers at the conference board, just completed a 18-month study on how organizations use human capital analytics. And the big headline is, actually there are two headlines. The big headline is that organizations that have dedicated human capital analytics functions within their HR area are actually outperforming organizations that don't use data analytics in their HR functions by 3 times efficiency.
Whoa.
So we use a measure called HCROI, Human Capital Return on Investment. And it is a very easy thing to calculate that doesn't require that you have a degree in statistics or even a degree in math. It's out there in the public domain. So if you Google, here's Googlization, if you Google HCROI formula, you can find it. And any organization can calculate their HCROI, their Human Capital Return on Investment. And in fact, here's a little plug, and my guys are going to be happy. We actually have an HCROI calculator. So if you go to our website and you search for HCROI calculator, all you have to do is input like 4 different values, and it'll instantly calculate your HCROI, and it'll show you how you can improve your HCROI and your profitability performance with small improvements in human capital efficiency. So go and look for it, plug in the numbers, you can measure your own HCROI.
That's fantastic. So you talked about business models that are needing to change. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you see that happening? Because I agree, I see that happening already.
Yeah. So I'm so happy that you mentioned this increase in the number of job postings, because I was actually going to bring it up and say that not only have we gone back to pre-COVID, we've gone beyond our pre-COVID level. Right. In fact, what the survey says, or what the research says, is that our job postings this month, in March, so a couple of months ago, was up 24% higher than it was February of 2020. So the 1 year after COVID, not only have we recovered, but now organizations are trying to fill those jobs at even a faster rate. That's for all jobs in general. What they found is that manufacturing job postings are up 65%, right? And stock postings are up 24% or 16, something like that. It's a phenomenal number. Companies are hungry for talent, right? And one of the things that I think when we talk about the business model changing is that organizations are going to have to embrace this concept of an employee-centric business model. Right now, most business models are customer-centric, consumer-centric. So they actually look at the consumer to figure out what the consumer wants, and then they back up to figure out what their business model should look like. right? Prior to that, we had a technology-focused business model. So we looked at technology, and then we backed our business model into how can we use technology to improve our business operations.
Right, and make more money. Right.
And make more money. Before that, I'm going back to like the Industrial Revolution, where we looked at manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So how do we organize ourselves to manufacture? So right now we're in a consumer-focused business model era. And that's shifting. And we're going to be shifting to an employee-centric business model. What does that mean? That means that the most important thing in our business model is going to be labor and how we attract, retain, and motivate. So the ARM, that hasn't changed. We're still working under that, model. We have to attract people, we have to retain them, and we have to motivate them. And in prior models, the human capital approach was around standardization, right? One employee handbook, one set of policies that all employees have to live under and live with.
Right.
We've got 5 generations in our workforce today. I'm a baby boomer. My needs are completely different than the Gen Zers. And for organizations to achieve diversity, right? To achieve their social, their social agenda in terms of doing right by their communities and by their employees.
Corporate social responsibility, right?
Exactly. We do have to be diverse. But how can one set of rules satisfy the needs of people representing 5 different generations? So we have to move away from standardization, and we have to move to personalization. We have to figure out as employers how to address the needs of the different segments of our population with rewards, programs, opportunities that are perceived by all employees to be fair.
So what you're saying, which is something that Ira and I have talked about for years, is that one size does not fit all.
Yes, one size doesn't fit all.
Right. And that idea of being employee-centric was the premise of a book that I wrote that got published 20 years ago called How to Become an Employer of Choice. And it's that employee centricity that is so important and will make a profound difference in the bottom line, because when companies take care of their employees, their employees will take care of the customers, and everybody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the big difference. 20 years ago, we didn't have the kind of technology,
right,
or kind of analytical approaches that we have today. So whereas 20 years ago, it would have been really hard to manage and understand how to personalize programs for the needs of employees, today it's possible, it's attainable, and we found that companies that actually do think about this are doing better than companies that are sticking to the old standard one size fits all.
So here's the catch-22, I assume. In order to personalize, you need data.
Yes. Yeah. And you need a way to think about data, to process data, to understand data, to make connections between human capital performance and enterprise level performance. Because again, every organization is different. I can't tell you, oh, you've got to have the best recruiting program or else you're not going to be successful, because that's not necessarily the case for every company. Every company is going to be different. So every company needs to find that special sauce that makes the Big Mac on the block, to use reference to McDonald's earlier.
So what are some of the, our audience has a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. I'm sure there's a few publicly traded, but mostly privately owned, small, medium-sized businesses. What are some of the metrics? I mean, we can go up and we can calculate the ROI and they go, oh, we need to change something. But what are some of the metrics that, any business should be identifying upfront and tracking and monitoring?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So one of the things that I teach my students is, and I teach in the master's program in human capital management. So they're all HR people. What my biggest message to them is you have to think of HR not as its own function siloed to the side, doing its own thing. You have to think about how human capital is connected to the business, right? And to the results that the business is generating. And I'm going to tie this back to our first concept, which is when you're spending that much on people, you owe it to your organization, to the stakeholders, the shareholders, the investors, the employees, the people that you do business with, to make sure that you're optimizing that investment in people. And so I teach my students to not just think about HR programs, but to think up to how HR is actually impacting the organization, and to think down how HR programs are impacting individuals. So to basically vertically integrate human capital into the business model. And at each one of those levels, there are lots of things that you can measure. So at the enterprise level, you can measure things like HCROI, human capital return on investment. You can measure HCVA, human capital value add. You can calculate HCMV. If you're a public company, HCMV. HEVA, human economic value add. Productivity, so what revenues are per employee. You can look at expense ratio, the per capita expenses, per capita income. So you can start understanding the economic value of each employee in terms of their contribution. So that's at the enterprise level. Then at the program level, we do a really good job of looking at KPIs, right? So if we got a performance management program, how many employees are actually participating in performance management? We look at our compensation to see how competitive it is. Right now, we've got to get into this whole area of pay equity to understand whether or not we've got biases in the way that we pay people. But that's a different podcast. There are lots of ways that we can measure the effectiveness of the individual human capital programs that we've got in our organization. And what I like to tell my students is these programs aren't siloed either. What are you doing with recruitment, and how does that impact retention? What are you doing in performance management, and how does that impact mobility and lateral moves, right? Or career advancement. So these programs touch one another, and you can't just look at it in a univariate, a single variable world. You have to look at it multivariately. How do these things connect with one another? So we can measure that as well and understand whether or not our programs are actually doing what we expect them to do, right?
Novel idea.
Solange, you were quoted in the NASD, what was it?
And NACD, the National
NACD, right.
Directors. So, thrilled to be included in that publication, especially since the board world is really my domain space. That's what my PhD is in, and I've served as a public company board director for a couple of companies. So I'm thrilled to be in that domain space and to make an impact. It's really important. The second little wave of the tsunami was around ESG,
right?
Disclosures, and this is a board issue. And boards that are not understanding the economic indicators of human capital as drivers of value creation for their stakeholders are missing the boat, right? They can't dedicate a full day to financial review and 10 minutes to HR review.
Right.
It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. I'm fond of saying it's like shooting themselves in the foot.
Yes, but they don't even know that it hurts.
Right.
It's the pain that shows up days later, right?
Yeah. But now, so here's the other thing. The reason that this is getting so much attention, like this big tsunami, is because the SEC is saying if human capital is material, you need to disclose it. Now, how do you define materiality? We can spend a whole podcast on that. But those rules were written under Jay Clayton, who is a principle-based guy. He was the chairman of the SEC. The new chairman of the SEC is a guy named Gary Gensler. Mr. Gensler is not a fan of principles-based. He's a fan of rules-based. So right now, the disclosure requirement says if the organization determines that human capital is material, then they need to disclose. So it's principles-based. Does it make an impact or not if it does disclose? The rules-based says, doesn't make any difference if it's principles-based. We want you to disclose these metrics regardless. So the community that's following this, that has a dog in the race on this disclosure, we're hopeful, we're optimistic that Mr. Gensler is going to transform the rule from a principles-based, disclose if you think it's material, to a rules-based like Sarbanes-Oxley or Dodd-Frank, that it doesn't make any difference if you think it's important. Your investors need to know what these metrics are. And boards need to start paying attention to this because they have a chance now to understand their metrics and to take action to make those metrics look better before they have to start disclosing them to the investor community.
Solange, I say this every week. We're going to change the name of our show to "We're Just Getting Started," and we are just getting started. But we are quickly at the end of your segment. Definitely want to get you back, and I've heard, and we've had a conversation, and I've participated in it, especially about diversity, inclusion, pay biases. You taught me so much from our first intros a year ago when we had some conversations about what to look for and how data, without data, without some of what you're talking about, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So we'd love to have you back. Across the screen is HCMoneyball.com. You can reach Solange there. I believe the ROI is the calculator's up there. Is that correct?
If you go onto HCMoneyball.com, you'll be able to get to the calculator.
Okay. And if someone wants to reach you directly, what's the best way?
They can write to me at SHRM@HCMoneyball.com.
That's easy enough.
Or they can look me up on LinkedIn and invite me to connect.
Wonderful. It's always great to see you, Solange. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much. And we'll definitely get you back.
Thank you, Solange. It was fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Amazing. As I said, we're going to change the show. I think it's going to be...
We're just getting started.
We're just getting started. And we want to be... we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to hear from our two sponsors, Ngomu and Success Performance Solutions. And Ngomu has a big announcement coming up in 2 weeks. Is that right, Joyce?
The 25th of May, yes.
Yeah. So the app will be out, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. Right now, we're going to hear from them. Stay tuned. We will be right back, and we're going to have our next guest, which is Debbie Levitt. We're going to talking about CX and UX.
Imagine growing great employees and advancing emerging leaders for less than $1 a day. The Ngomu app will support your employees in a myriad of ways, from career and personal development to health and wellness. No need to schedule and hold trainings. Just have them access over 90 coaches for live virtual group and one-on-one coaching for whatever topic they need or want to work on. Anytime, anywhere. Learn more at ngomu.com today.
For many people, the bridge to the new normal is too far, too difficult, too scary. Waiting to get back to normal becomes a way of life, filled with fear and despair. But wait, why are those people who dare to travel to the new normal celebrating? Opportunity and growth? How can you get a piece of the action? The bridge between the past and the future, the status quo and the new normal, is adaptability. You have a choice. Which side of the future do you want to land on? Will it be coping and surviving or growing and thriving? Adaptability quotient is the new competitive edge.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. If you're not a member subscriber of Googlization Nation, please do so. You go to googlizationnation.com. And also, following up on the adaptability theme, we'll be having our webinar next Thursday, May 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can go to bit.ly/AQAI520. The link will run that. There it is. bit.ly/AQAI520.
And for our Ngomu sponsorship, I wanted just to mention that on the 25th of May, it will be 11 o'clock Eastern that it will start. And it's going to give people a taste of what Ngomu coaching is all about. And one of the teams that may make an appearance on that launch is Bill Jensen and myself.
Oh, so. Wonderful. Very good. And Bill's a good mutual friend, and he's been a guest of the show in just a few weeks ago. So that's wonderful. But today, right now, we've got Debbie Levitt, a good friend of mine. Met Debbie 3-4 years ago. She introduced me. For anybody who follows me, know we talk about the FCDD, frustrating, confusing, disappointing, distraction. All the time.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, and I've been having a ball with it. So we want to welcome Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. And there's Debbie all the way from Italy. So.
Thank you. And these are the 4 horsemen of bad CX and UX: frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction. My registered trademark. Joyce, great to meet you. And Ira, good to see you again. Hope you're well.
Yeah, for sure.
You. Great to meet you too, Debbie.
So I know you were listening to at the tail end. We were talking about, one of the factors. We were talking about all the analytics and data, but certainly overlooked in all this, and it still is CX and UX. So first, I want you to give a brief definition for that, because I said I'm not sure I'm not sure a lot of people could spell UX. For that intensive purposes. But you've just, I know this is your passion, and you're so passionate. You did a 50 video course to try to change people's perspective of the importance about this, especially in talent acquisition, and especially how to hire people that understand CX and UX. So let's start with UX and CX, and then we'll dive into what it's about.
Yeah, we'll talk about the free training in a moment. So CX and UX are customer experience and user experience. And basically, these are the people at your company that are supposed to be making things user-friendly. Typically, they're people who have studied some cognitive psychology and human behavior. They're not necessarily artists, but they are the people who are going to usually research with customers and do architecture. And usually you think of them as designers, though not all of us are designers. Some of us are more researchers. And hopefully some testing of the idea before engineers and programmers and the technical people piece it together and get it out to the public. So a lot of times people don't even know who at their company makes something user-friendly and make sure that something was really created for user needs, but that is a specialized job. But at almost every company I've ever heard of in my life, that job is not well created, not well described. Culture is a mess. We are flight risks as soon as we show up. And so I figured, what's really missing here is some training, because I think a lot of companies just don't even understand what we do. So they don't know how to assess the candidates. If I said, Ira, you need to assess a DevOps specialist who will deploy a Kubernetes cluster, you'd be like, I don't know how to assess if that person can do that or not, but maybe I'll send them a personality test. But the problem is that people don't even know how to assess us. So there's problems at pretty much every stage of the hiring and retention.
Wow. So is that what the course is about? How to help the HR professionals and small business people, or small and medium-sized business people who might be hiring CX and UX folks to?
Oh, it's for everybody. The Fortune 10 could use it. Their jobs aren't going right either. I know plenty of people who wish they could get away from some of these companies and find something else. So it's for everyone of every size who thinks that they might need somebody at their company who's going to kind of shepherd that user friendliness and that usability. And so it's totally free. I don't even put you on a mailing list. It's it's 8 hours of content split into 50 videos. You don't even have to watch them in order. And basically, it's all about understanding CX and UX and how to write better job descriptions, how to understand why we're typically flight risks, what is going wrong in these organizations that we don't want to join and we don't want to stay, and how to create better jobs so that not only are you attracting and retaining talent, but you're going to increase customer satisfaction. If you can bring in the right people to make your websites, apps, systems, and services better, you're probably going to end up more profitable. Like, it's kind of a no-lose situation. But unfortunately, right now, I mean, we have people who have master's degrees in research, and they're being asked to show their ability to draw.
Uh-oh.
And we're like, okay, wow, somebody really doesn't understand what you do all day if they want to see your art portfolio. That shouldn't even be a part of the assessment. So, so yeah, I want to drive everybody towards, I have a website that I call the Delta CX Academy, which is deltacx.academy. That's a web address, by the way. You can just type that right in, and that's going to take you to all of my online courses, and just look for attracting and retaining CX and UX talent. And I just got an email from, how do you pronounce these guys? SHRM. I always want to say SHRM, but I know that's not right. SHRM just accepted me as a recertification provider, and I have applied for this course to have credits. And because it is 8 hours of content, it might possibly qualify for 8 credits. So that is not certified yet, but I'm really hoping in the coming weeks that it will be accepted. But even if it's not, you should still take it, because if you are HR recruiter, sourcer, talent agent, or hiring manager, this information can only help you.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
So Debbie, I mean, we've been working together for a bit, and I'm a novice at this, but I get the general idea. But I'm also standing in the shoes of clients, manufacturer, distributor, retail, healthcare. And they go, what, we hire a marketing company that is our CX and UX, or we do this. Why would every company should have somebody looking at their UX and CX?
I think you just answered it. Hiring, no offense to the marketing companies out there who are generally quite capable and talented, but hiring a marketing company to do your CX and UX is like asking your dentist to check this weird thing on your foot. And so in reality, no offense to the dentists on the show,
yeah,
but
I didn't take any offense.
Right. And so the problem is that, we all have specializations. That's a beautiful thing. And I always recommend that people and companies play to those specializations. You are going to get so much better outcomes and customer satisfaction and worker morale by working with a CX or UX specialist utilized correctly than you are by asking marketing to guess at our stuff. No offense to marketing. There's a lot of important things that they do that we're bad at. But when it comes to CX and UX, it really is a specialization. But unfortunately, it's such a misunderstood specialization that I thought it needed some training.
So even if you don't need a full-time CX UX person, there should be somebody on your team or in the organization that is well versed in that. Am I correct? I mean, sort of a leading question to you. But.
Yeah, I mean, well, it sounds right, but many companies don't do that. And even really the real starting point is, even if you get the feeling, say you're healthcare, hey, we find a lot of people dropping off our website before they book an appointment with our doctor, or, hey, we find people send customer service the same questions over and over. What's going wrong here? The great thing about qualified and talented CX and UX practitioners is you don't have to tell us what the problem is, because we typically start with research. We're going to learn what the problem is. And so we're really for everybody. But even if you are the type of organization who doesn't keep those people on staff, or even anybody who understands what we do, you can still reach out to freelancers or agencies or outside people, but my training will help you know how to assess them and how to communicate to them what you're looking for. Because again, too many people think that this job is just artsy fartsy, but again, many of us have some training in, or more than some training in psychology. This is about understanding human behavior so well, and of course, researching with people and watching them do things, and being able to be those problem finders before we're problem solvers.
Right. This sounds like a precursor to the CEXO that I talk about in my new book, Debbie, the Chief Experience Officer. And what a great place for a person to start in an organization to learn all about CX and UX, right?
The CXO job already exists. And so there are some people out there who are already CXOs. And hypothetically, that would be a branch in the organization that is not answering to any other, that would just be focused on the CX and UX elements. Marketing can have their CMO and finance can have their CFO. But who do we, sometimes we end up under engineering, but we're not engineers. So this is really a mistake. So ultimately, and my training covers that as well. Where do we belong in the organization? I cover how many years of experience should our managers and leaders have. It's really a huge breadth of stuff that's covered. And so ultimately, if a company is thinking about moving into having CX and UX practitioners, this training is for you. If you have them, but you notice they keep walking out the door, this training is for you. If you have them, but you get the feeling they're artists who like to draw pictures, this training is for you. There's really something in there for everybody, because I know people are coming at it with different questions, concerns, and confusions about what the heck we do and why can't anybody do it.
So, I mean, even as we prepare for what our future, whatever our future is going to be, whether it's a career, I mean, we talk about the four horsemen. We talk about, what's frustrating, confusing, distracting, and often disappointing as we approach the future. Again, it's about the experience, and when you think about it, we often think, oh, it's about a form, or it's about the technology, or it's about how somebody accesses something, but it's much broader than that. And you're absolutely right to think of how you would assess someone, even if it's part of their job, part of their responsibility. How do we identify that they're are they a researcher or a designer, as you've pointed out so eloquently? Debbie, we are almost at the end. As I said, we're just getting started.
I know. We've got a couple minutes. What can I tell you about, other than reminding everybody the training's totally free? I'm just trying to make my industry better, and I'm trying to make your workplace better, because you probably don't understand what we do. And so this is just an opportunity for you to have all those questions answered. And if you thought you knew what CX and UX was, then you're brushing up, and you're seeing if what you thought was accurate and updated, because again, there's a lot of misunderstandings. For example, I don't believe in design thinking. I think design thinking is a fake thing, and so design thinking is not a thing, and it's a trend, and it needs to go away as soon as possible, because it's another thing that makes people think, oh, if that's what UX is, anybody can do it. And that's not the case. We really are specialized, and you're getting it wrong if you're not hiring specialists. You need low ego action heroes, not thinkers.
And who is this young person?
This is my mascot, my low ego action hero from my Delta CX YouTube channel.
Aha. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. This has really been fascinating.
Debbie, it's always good to see you. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to get you on and introduce this. We're going to I'm certainly going to be. We'll push it out. We'll be able to do it through the through this podcast, and I'm going to definitely encourage HR to be looking at it. But also, again, I think CX and UX, whether it's a part-time role, whether it's a responsibility, or whether they're hiring freelancers, it needs to be part of this whole experience. So thank you for introducing me to that, and thank you for allowing me to talk about the 401.
Yes, thanks everybody. And again, if anyone has any questions, find me and email me. I'm happy to help.
Delta CX Academy as well. So
thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Interesting show. Interesting show. Yeah. I was going to share this with Solange and then with Debbie, and we just didn't have time. But this morning, I mean, I'm working with the client, one of my clients, and we've been analyzing the data. So we're doing the right stuff. They have thousands, and they have like 100,000 assessments that they've completed. And we're going to take it back. And I keep asking them year after year of, let's look at it, see what some of the trends are. How can we help this make it better? So we finally had an appointment a couple of weeks ago. We did that. We looked at the data. We found a couple cues. We went back to them and said, boy, if we had this information or that information, we can even make it tighter and better. Got an email this morning. Can we postpone this a few weeks because we don't have the time? We're going to wait for it to slow down.
Oh, boy.
And we do have data that we have a cutoff that if they would not hire people below a certain range, that they could cut their turnover somewhere between 25 and 50%.
Really?
And they don't have time to meet because they're so busy and they're waiting for things to slow down, which I don't know in anybody's right mind, because they're talking about every economist I've seen talks about the economy continuing to grow and boom through 2023.
Yeah, there's not going to be a slowdown between now and whenever.
Right, for the next 3 years. So again, we've had two great topics that were two great speakers with Solange Charas talking about data, the valuing,
human capital.
Human capital management, human capital, and then Debbie talking about user experience and customer experience.
Candidate experience, actually.
Yeah, and candidate.
I thought it was customer when I first saw it, but
it is. She refers it to customer. I refer to it as candidate.
Okay.
Yeah. But we again are at the end of our show. We're probably a few seconds over there. We appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you're not part of it yet, please do so. You can formally do that by subscribing to Googlizationnation.com. It's free. You'll get updates each week about upcoming events, upcoming shows. We got our webinar coming up May 20th, 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. bit.ly/AQAI520. You can sign up for that. That's free. And also
on 25th of May, people can sign up for the launch of Ngomu.com.
Yep.
And if you go to the Ngomu website, you will probably find the place where you can sign up.
And Joyce, right before we went on the air, I got my newsletter, humantrendalert.com.
Herman Trend Alert.
Yeah, Herman Trend Alert. Or it could be Human Trend Alert.
And this week I talked about COVID-19 and sleep.
And sleep, yeah, no, that's what caught my attention with sleep. So again, thank you very much. Thanks for being part of Googlization Nation. Until next week's show, don't let the shift hit your plan.
Bye-bye.